As I quickly approach my 30th birthday, I want to share with you guys 9 different money and life habits that I've found to be super important throughout my 20s, which may be helpful in your life too. One of the biggest financial hacks to have in your early 20s is to A, have a partner, and B, have that partner be someone who you're financially aligned with. Now, marriage may not be on the card straight away, but it's important to know that roughly 20 to 40% of marriages actually fail as a result of money problems. Now, I personally believe that's not helped on by the fact that money is largely a taboo subject in the English culture. It's something that's supposed to be kept private, but on a personal level, I completely disagree with this. After all, how can we understand something along with help each other out with something if it's a topic that's not talked about? If you can be open and honest with your partner about your financial situation as well as your collective financial situation as a partnership, regardless of whether you're married or not, and if you can actually kind of put some kind of financial goals together that you want to work towards, I personally believe it bonds you closer together and gives you a sense of purpose. Whether that's kind of buying your first house together, going on your dream holiday, or perhaps even just saving up for a wedding if you're not yet married. Whereas if you don't kind of have this financial alignment with each other, well, financial issues could be the thing that pushes you apart. So don't wait for money to become a problem within your relationship, and instead talk openly about it in the sense of it being a positive and constructive conversation that can help move you forward and not create a challenge instead. Warren Buffett once said, "Don't save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." For me, I have some non-negotiables in life, and one of those things is to save a portion of my income every single month without fail. Here's exactly how I personally manage my money. As soon as I get paid, I take a portion of that money and I put it straight into a joint account which covers things like our bills and mortgage. These are financial obligations that we have as a couple that we can't get out of come rain or shine. So making sure that that money is in that account ready and waiting for those bills to be paid is important to me, and I guess it's financially responsible too. Then I put another portion of my income into a savings account, where I'm getting I think just shy of about 4% worth of interest right now, which is obviously a good bonus. It's where I have my emergency fund, which gives me an element of financial security that helps me sleep well at night. Only at that point, once I've done those two very important financial things, will I then go on to use that money for whatever I please. And look, I don't make it my aim each month to spend every single penny that's left over. In actual fact, I kind of just spend on the stuff that I actually need, and then if there is any left over, then that's obviously a good thing. I found having a bit of a methodical process like this that's become very much just an ingrained habit has helped me feel financially secure within my 20s, so make sure that you have your own process too. I'm sure many of you guys are the same, but I can sometimes literally sit at a desk for 12, 14 hours a day on occasion, doubled over a laptop screen. And I've heard and seen all of the kind of studies that say that that's not good for you. Albeit allegedly having also a standing desk can be bad for you too. So to kind of combat this overall lack of movement, which can be sometimes less than like 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day, I try and get out, get away from the laptop screen and do a little bit of exercise. In the last 18 months or so, I've actually really got into running, and it's become part of my weekly routine and another one of my non-negotiables, especially whilst I've been following like training plans over the course of the past 12 months or so in order to help prepare me for the 2 half marathons which I've done this year, with my most recent one being the Manchester Half Marathon just a couple of weekends ago. It helps me get away from the laptop, get some fresh air, clear my head, and get in some well-needed exercise. But I found with all of that and having a busy lifestyle and running a business, it's important to be fueled correctly, which links me on quite nicely to today's video sponsor, which is Huel. I've been recently using the Huel Black Edition, which adds a high protein meal into my diet, and it also includes vitamin B12 to help reduce tiredness and fatigue, which is certainly something that I need after a long day of work. But when I'm out training, recovery is just as important as the run itself, especially if I'm out running kind of like 10k or more, and then I need to kind of come back and have like the mental capacity to continue working. Having Huel's nutritionally complete Black Edition with 26 vitamins and minerals and with 40 grams of protein per serving, I certainly feel like it helps me stay on top of my game. It takes like less than 30 seconds to prepare. Just grab the Black Edition, add some water, grab a scoop, drop it into your shaker, give it a good shake, and away you go. I think the flavors are very much specific to the individual, but I've been recently using the Black Edition chocolate flavor, but there are many different flavors available over on the Huel website. I'll leave a link to Huel down in the description below, whereby you'll get £10 off your first order when you use this promo code. So if you are interested in Huel, be sure to use that code, which is going to be live until the 3rd of November 2024. And of course, a big thanks to Huel for sponsoring this segment of the video. If you're in your 20s, that is the absolute best time to take a chance on yourself, take a risk on yourself, where you don't have like adult responsibilities at that point, like kids and stuff, which are going to suck up all of your time. Start a passion project that you can do outside of your full-time studies or even outside of your normal working hours, especially if it's something that you've kind of thought about doing before. And what I'd say here is like try and find something that you enjoy and then try and build out your little side hustle or project around that thing. I did lots of different things before I actually got into YouTube. I sold stuff on eBay, I built up Instagram theme pages, and eventually landed on YouTube as the thing that turned into a successful business. More so, the kind of Instagram theme pages thing taught me a lot about social media, which inevitably proved to help me out massively when it came to actually growing a YouTube channel. In actual fact, this study from Stanford kind of backs this up. It says that entrepreneurs have a dramatic improvement from their first to their second venture, with an average revenue increase of 82%. So whilst the selling on eBay and the Instagram theme pages didn't really work out for me personally, all of those things led up to me being able to be somewhat successful on YouTube. So be sure to use the time that you have wisely to learn and develop your own skills, because you never know where those skills could take you in the future. Because all I will say is don't be that person that never tried, especially if you've got the itch to do something, then just do it, because the chances are you won't regret it. As many of you guys know, I'm a massive advocate of investing for your future. In actual fact, for the most part, is what this channel is all about. And the reason for this is because most of us actually aren't doing enough financially to be able to retire, let alone retire early. There's some research done by the DeVere Group that found that 74% of Brits are not on track to retire with sufficient funds to maintain their current lifestyle. With one of the major highlights from this research paper saying, and I'm going to quote this, "A lack of awareness around the importance of investing as part of a retirement plan, with the firm saying that many focus solely on saving and actually not realizing how critical investing is to grow their wealth over time, particularly with inflation eating into their savings." If we use one of the common retirement principles, which is the rule of 4%, which basically says that you can withdraw about 4% of the value of your investment portfolio without it kind of declining in value, because it should typically be invested in low risk assets during that time. If you were to earn £50,000 in today's money, you would need a retirement pot or an investment portfolio pot valued at £1 million. But it's not quite as simple as that, because that £1 million pot that you need is in today's money. The reality is £50,000 worth of spending power today is not going to be the same as £50,000 worth of spending money perhaps 30 years into the future. In actual fact, if we just assume an average inflation rate of say 3% per year until you come to retire in 30 years from now, you would actually need closer to £2.5 million in your retirement pot to have that same £50,000 worth of spending power that you have today. So investing in inflationary beating assets, in my opinion, has to be a financial priority. And the earlier that everybody can understand this, the better position that they'll hopefully be in many decades into the future. Each year around Christmas time, I kind of sit back and try and think about the goals that I've achieved in the past 12 months, along with the goals that I have for the next 12 months ahead. And in the last few years, I've kind of focused on 4 key areas. That's relationships, lifestyle, business, and financial. I think all 4 of these areas are really important to me personally, and I still need to set goals in line with them in order to become just a better all-rounded person. But the reason why I write down my goals, and the reason why you should too, is because that according to research, people that write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them than the people who don't. And I've certainly found, whilst I've been in my 20s and specifically more my early 20s, that my financial goals were really important to me. Whether that was building up an emergency fund, saving for a house deposit, or perhaps even just building out my investment portfolio. But there was a bit of a process that I followed to try and break down these bigger financial goals into smaller, more achievable targets. And here's how I kind of did it, and you can kind of follow this process too. Let's say I had a goal that I want to personally invest £50,000 into an investment portfolio. Well, that seems like quite a sizable amount of money and might seem a little bit overwhelming to begin with. And let's say the time frame that I had for this was that I wanted to achieve this by age 30, and let's just say hypothetically that I'm 21 years of age right now. The first thing that I would calculate is how much that I needed to contribute in order to be able to achieve this number. And for me personally, I was getting paid monthly. I still do get paid monthly. And because of that, I worked out what the monthly contribution was that I needed as it was aligned to the frequency that I was being paid. So the first thing to do is simply break down that £50,000 into monthly installments. So it would be 108 months between now and age 30 that I had to build up this £50,000 portfolio. Divide that into an investment each month and it works out to be a contribution of £462.90 that you needed to invest to achieve that goal. And then of course any additional investment returns on top of that would be an absolute bonus. So be sure to work out what your bigger financial goals are and then kind of methodically work out how you can achieve them, but in smaller bite-sized chunks. Because if you do it that way, that goal will then feel a hell of a lot more achievable. I've always kind of been a little bit torn about like the ultimate frugal money mindset that's spoken about quite frequently online, and at kind of what point that you actually draw the line. Like, is spending £4 on a coffee each day whilst you're at work financially acceptable? Or is it financially irresponsible and counterproductive? Especially when you work out that £4 a day times by 5 working days in a week, multiplied by 48 working weeks in a year, works out to be about £960 on your favourite latte. I'll let you guys debate whether that money could be better used down in the comment section below, but for me, I would rather sacrifice some of the smaller, more regular expenses for one bigger, more memorable expenses, perhaps once a year. What I mean by that is I personally would sacrifice a daily coffee in order to have an extra 960 quid that I could spend on an experience or a memory that would last a lifetime. For me, it's not just a case of trying to make as much money as humanly possible and then hoarding it all away for no reason. And instead, it's about using that money and spending that money in the right places instead. It's what's kind of touched upon in this book called Die with Zero, which is a little bit more about acquiring experience points of your lifetime versus just purely wealth. Whether that's kind of going on an extra European city break this year or treating your partner to a fancy date night dinner once a quarter. Start giving yourself those experiences by not throwing your money away on kind of small expenses that add very little value to your life. This one might be a little bit more controversial and is probably a little bit less aligned to modern day thinking, but if you're in a position to do so, buy a home as soon as you can. I lived away a little bit whilst I was on a banking graduate scheme after university, and I lived down in London in a kind of shared house, and if I'm honest, I absolutely hated it. Despite actually looking back now and thinking it was actually a great life experience. So that time away was enough for me to realize that I much preferred being in and around where my family was, where my partner was, and having kind of a base that I could call home. And also just purely from a financial perspective, it kind of works out beneficial too, especially if you've not had to go through a relationship breakdown and you can kind of reap the benefits of just general property market growth here in the UK. Buying a home sooner rather than later will mean that you're in a far better financial position relative to that of a first-time buyer that's got to wait an additional 5 years. What I mean by that is if you kind of buy a property today, and let's just use average house price figures just for the purpose of example, at £293,399, which is based on the latest Halifax house price index figures, and just taking into account last year's year-over-year growth figures of 4.7%, and hypothetically saying that that will continue for an additional 5 years into the future, buying that same average house price today, 5 years from now, will actually cost you about £370,000. That could be the equivalent to like £76,000 or £77,000 worth of equity that you could have built up during that time. And that's just purely on capital appreciation and doesn't even give any attention to the fact that you will have paid down your mortgage a little bit during that time too. Appreciate home buying isn't for everybody and also isn't affordable for everybody, but that's just my 2 pence based on what I did and what I kind of prioritized financially during my early 20s. So that's why I personally think it makes sense to kind of settle down as soon as you find the right person to do so with, and then buy a home as soon as it becomes financially affordable. In the last 5 days, I've quite shockingly spent 10 hours on all social platforms, which works out to be about 2 hours a day. Now, I do kind of do social media for a living, so I guess that's a little bit of an excuse because I have to do a little bit of research on social media, on what videos are performing well and what videos you guys are going to find most valuable. But having said that, not all of that screen time is work related. I, just like many of you guys, find myself flicking through TikTok or Instagram, browsing through and consuming content that's not value adding or contributing to my life in any way whatsoever. And actually there's a lot of negativity associated with those who spend too much time consuming social media content, especially those that are in their late teens and in their 20s too. So what I would say is try and flip the script on this. habits, instead of kind of consuming content, actually start to produce some. That's kind of how my journey started. I was consuming a lot of finance content on the internet. I thought, well, why can't I do that myself and do so in a way that's truly value adding and actually helpful to a potential audience out there? I guess it's kind of flipping the script on the whole narrative on social media, which is somewhat negative and kind of mental health impacting, to something that's actually used for a force for good instead. And after all, it's not only something that I've been able to use to help other people, but it's also been something that I've also used to help myself. After all, I've turned it into a business, which has inevitably allowed me to achieve some of the goals that I have in my life as well. So look, I hope some of those money and life habits resonated. And as I go throughout my 30s, I'm sure there'll be a lot more to learn. But for now, YouTube thinks that you might enjoy watching this video next. But before you click on that, be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Drop a like on the video on your way out. And with that being said, I'll see you over in the next one.